Right now, without you doing a single thing, data is traveling through your walls. And somewhere on the floor of the Pacific Ocean, there's a cable thinner than a garden hose, keeping you connected to the rest of the world. Today, we're talking about the internet, where it actually came from, what it almost wasn't, and why the first message ever sent over it was just 2 letters. I'm Alexandra. Welcome to the Hidden Life of Things, everyday history for anyone who's ever looked at something ordinary and wondered, how did this actually get here? Sit with me today. I think you'll be glad you did. I want you to try something just for a second. Think about everything you've done on the internet today. A message you sent, something you searched, a video that loaded, a map you checked. Now think about the fact that none of that, not a single bit of it, exists in one place. There's no building you could point to and say, that's where the internet lives. No central switch, no headquarters, no off button. The internet is, by any reasonable measure, the most complex structure human beings have ever built. It spans every continent, it runs under the ocean, it travels through the air. And the vast majority of people who use it every single day, billions of people on every part of this planet, have essentially no idea how it works, or very little. Which is fine. You don't need to know how a road is built to drive on one. But I think there's something genuinely wonderful that happens when you actually look at it and understand where it came from, because the story is not what you'd expect. It didn't start with a vision of connecting humanity. It didn't start with a business plan. It started with a Cold War, a handful of university researchers, some very expensive computers that nobody wanted to share, and a crash. Let's go back to 1969. The year is 1969. The Cold War is very much on. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik just over a decade earlier, and governments around the world are in a state of productive anxiety about science, technology, and who is leading in both. In the United States, the Department of Defense has set up a research agency, ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, and they have a frustratingly simple problem. They funded a number of universities and research labs across the country, and each of those labs has a computer, a big, expensive, room-sized computer. And those computers are not talking to each other. If a researcher at one university wanted to use a program that only existed on a computer somewhere else, they had one of 2 options. 1, travel there, or 2, wait for someone to mail them the files on a physical magnetic tape, which took a long time. So ARPA funded a project to connect these machines, not to share information the way we think of it today, not streaming, not social media, not email as we know it, just to let researchers share access to each other's computers remotely. That's the whole original vision. Modest, practical, a little unglamorous. The network was called ARPANET. And on October 29th, 1969, a student programmer named Charlie Klein at UCLA attempted to send the very first message over this network. He was trying to log into a computer at the Stanford Research Institute, a few hundred miles away. The procedure was to type just 3 letters, L-O-G, and the system at the other end was designed to complete the command itself, adding IN to make login. Klein typed L, it arrived. He typed O, it arrived. He typed G, and the system crashed. The first message ever sent over what would become the internet was LO, which is either a beautiful accident, low as in lo and behold, or just a very on-brand story about technology, which is that it almost works and then immediately fails in a way that is technically still a milestone. They fixed the crash within the hour, the full login worked, but LO is the message history remembers. Through the 1970s, ARPANET grew, more universities joined, and crucially, international nodes began to appear. Norway joined in 1973, becoming the first country outside the United States on the network, followed by the United Kingdom. The idea was escaping its original borders almost immediately. The protocols, the agreed-upon rules that let different computers talk to each other, were developed and refined by researchers across multiple institutions and countries. 2 computer scientists, named Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn, designed something called TCP/IP in 1974, building on earlier work by British and French researchers, including Donald Davis at the UK's National Physical Laboratory, who had independently developed the concept of packet switching. The internet from its earliest days was an international collaboration, even when the headlines focused elsewhere. And here's something worth pausing on, because it shaped everything that came after. The people building this were mostly academics, researchers. They weren't building a product. The culture was genuinely open and collaborative. You published your work, other people improved it, you built on each other's contributions. There was an almost philosophical commitment to openness baked into the architecture from the very beginning. Which is partly why, when it eventually grew into a global public network, it remained open. Nobody owns the core infrastructure of the internet the way one company owns a telephone network. It's a shared commons. It still is, though the economics of what runs on top of it gets complicated very, very fast. By the late 1980s, ARPANET, officially decommissioned in 1990, had grown into a broader worldwide web of connected networks. The internet, lowercase, in its modern sense, existed. But it was still extremely difficult to use. You needed to know specific addresses, you needed to understand protocols. It was not by any stretch for regular people. And then one man sat down at a computer at a physics lab in Switzerland and changed everything. Here's a distinction I want to draw carefully, because people mix these up all the time, and honestly, why would you know the difference? No one ever explains it. The internet and the World Wide Web are not the same thing. The internet is the hardware, the cables, the routers, the servers, the physical and technical infrastructure that connects computers together. It's the road network. The World Wide Web is the software. It's the system of pages and documents that sit on top of the internet and link to each other. It's the traffic, the destinations, the signs. It runs on the internet, but it's a completely separate invention. The internet, early 1970s, the World Wide Web, 1989. One person, his name was Tim Berners-Lee, a British computer scientist working at CERN, the particle physics laboratory near Geneva, Switzerland, where researchers from dozens of countries collaborate. And his problem was genuinely mundane. CERN had thousands of researchers from all over the world. Everyone had documents and databases, and the information kept getting lost. People finished their contracts and left, taking their knowledge with them. There was no consistent way to find anything. He wrote a proposal. His supervisor at CERN, a man named Mike Sendall, received it and wrote a few words on the cover page that have since become rather famous. Those words said, "Vague but exciting." I love that note. I think about it a lot. Vague but exciting is the endorsement every genuinely new idea deserves at the beginning. The proposal sketched out three things: a way of writing documents with links inside them that could point to other documents, which is what we now call hyperlinks; a way of identifying where any document lived on the network, what we now call a URL; and a protocol for requesting and receiving those documents, what we now call HTTP. He called it the World Wide Web, and then, and this is the decision that I think mattered more than the invention itself, he and CERN chose to make it free. In 1993, they released the technology into the public domain. No patent, no license fee, no royalties. Anyone, anywhere in the world could build a website, build a browser, use it, forever, for nothing. Berners-Lee was asked about this decision later. He said simply that if the web had been patented, it would never have grown the way it did. You can't have a web that connects everything if not everyone can participate. This decision, made in Switzerland by a British scientist at an international institution, meant that the web belonged to the world rather than to any company or country. The number of websites went from 1 in 1999 to 1 million by 1997, then 100 million. Today, there are estimated to be somewhere between 5 and 600 billion indexed pages. But that explosion created a new problem. How do you find anything? This is where the 1990s get entertaining. What followed was a global race to organize the web, and it was genuinely competitive on every continent. The first major approach was essentially a directory. Yahoo launched in 1994 and was at its core a human-curated list. You browse categories until you found what you needed. Meanwhile, search engines that crawled and indexed the web automatically were being developed simultaneously by teams in multiple countries. Europe had its own contenders, so did Asia. Japanese internet culture in particular was developing its own rich ecosystem of web organization tools alongside the Western ones. The fundamental problem was scale. The web was growing faster than any human team could catalog, and faster than early algorithms could rank meaningfully. Then, in 1998, two PhD students at Stanford, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, launched a search engine with a slightly silly name. Their key insight was elegant. Instead of just counting how many times a search team appeared on a page, measure how many other pages linked to it. If many pages link to something, it's probably genuinely useful. Academic citation logic applied to the web. The results were noticeably better than anything else available. Word spread fast, and within a few years, Google had won the search race so decisively that the company's name became a verb, one of the very rare brands to achieve that in any language. The web had found its librarian. We are right now in this moment living through another shift, a significant one. For 30 years, the dominant way humans accessed information on the internet was the search query. You have a question, you type keywords, you get a list of links, you click around. That model is being disrupted in real time by AI. Instead of returning links to you to read yourself, AI systems can read thousands of documents and give you a synthesized answer directly. Whether this is straightforwardly better is genuinely open. It's faster and often more useful, but it also removes a layer of judgment. The moment where you look at multiple sources and decide what you believe. When a system summarizes 10 articles for you, you're trusting its synthesis in a way you weren't when you read those articles yourself. That's worth thinking about, wherever you are in the world, in whatever language you use to search. But let me say something about the bigger picture, because I think we're so inside this moment that we sometimes forget how extraordinary it looks from outside of it. For almost all of human history, access to information was rationed. By class, you needed money for books, for tutors, for university. By geography, if the library was far away or if it burned down, that knowledge was simply gone. By language, by power, by who controlled the means of writing things down and preserving what was written. The Library of Alexandria, the legendary ancient library, is held up as a symbol of accumulated human knowledge. At its peak, it may have held hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Scholars traveled from across the ancient world to access it. When it declined over centuries, it was considered a civilizational loss. Every person listening to this who has a smartphone and a data connection, whether in Lagos or Lima, Seoul or Stockholm, a village or a capital city, has access to more of humanity's accumulated knowledge than any king, any emperor, any scholar of any previous era. More than Aristotle, more than Leonardo da Vinci, more than Newton. Let that sit for a second. And here is the thing I want to leave you with, something I find genuinely mind-bending when I let myself think about it properly. For billions of years, this planet turned in silence. Information existed in the structure of rocks, in the DNA of living things, in light bouncing off mountains and seas, but it couldn't travel between minds. A thought that occurred in one person died with that person. A discovery made in one place stayed in that place. The universe was full of knowing, and none of it could speak to any other part of it. And then, in an almost incomprehensibly thin sliver of cosmic time, in the last 50 years out of 4.5 billion, we laced the entire surface of this planet together. We made it so that a question asked in a village in Ghana, and a question asked in an apartment in Seoul, and a question asked by a child in Sao Paulo can all reach the same answer in the same second. The universe has been around for 13.8 billion years. The World Wide Web is 35 years old. We are, by any cosmic measure, just getting started. So the next time your phone loads a page in a fraction of a second, or you ask a question and an answer simply appears as if from nowhere, remember what actually happened. A pulse of laser light traveled through a glass fiber under an ocean. Dozens of machines passed a packet of data between them in less time than it takes to blink. A system built by researchers on multiple continents who weren't trying to get rich, made free by a man who could have been a billionaire and chose not to be, held together by protocols written 50 years ago that nobody has needed to replace. It's not magic, it's something better than magic. It's the work of human beings. From California to Cambridge, from Geneva to Oslo, who decided against all commercial logic to build something and just give it away? History isn't only in museums. Sometimes it's in your pocket, quietly doing something extraordinary. Stay curious. I'm Alexandra, and I'll talk to you next week.